The bullet shattered the window of Victoria Ashford's ranch house on a sweltering August afternoon in 1878, and she knew immediately that Marcus Greeley had finally made good on his threats. Victoria dropped to the floor, her heart hammering as glass rained down onto the worn floorboards. She crawled toward the rifle propped against the stone fireplace, her calico dress gathering dust as she moved. Outside, she could hear horses and the rough laughter of men who thought intimidation would succeed where money had failed. "Miss Ashford," a voice called from beyond her fence line. "Mr. Greeley's given you plenty of chances. Time's running out." She reached the rifle and checked the ammunition with practiced hands. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 12, back when this land was just a dream he carried in his weathered journal. Now, 16 years later, she was 28 and alone, defending 300 acres of the best grazing land in Ellsworth, Kansas against men who saw her gender as weakness. "You can tell Marcus Greeley that I'll see this land burn before I sell it to him." Victoria shouted back, rising just enough to peer through the broken window. She counted 4 men on horseback, all wearing the Silver Star badges that Greeley had somehow convinced the territorial governor to issue to his private thugs. The men fired a few more shots into the air, their intent clear. They wanted her scared, wanted her to understand that a woman had no business holding onto prime real estate when powerful men desired it. Then they rode off, leaving nothing but dust and the echo of hoofbeats. Victoria stood slowly, glass crunching under her boots. She surveyed the damage with a heavy heart. The window would need replacing, and she had already spent most of her savings keeping the ranch operational through a difficult spring. Her cattle were healthy, her water rights secure, but none of that mattered if Greeley's men burned her out or worse. She walked outside into the scorching heat, shielding her eyes as she looked across her land. The prairie grass swayed in waves of gold and green, stretching toward distant hills. Her father had chosen this spot because of the creek that ran through it year-round, never drying up even in the worst droughts. That water made her 300 acres worth more than 1,000 acres of dry land anywhere else in the county. That was why Greeley wanted it so badly. He had been buying up properties all along the creek, assembling a cattle empire that would dominate Kansas. Victoria's land sat right in the middle of his holdings, a stubborn gap in his kingdom. He had offered her good money at first, then better money, then threats when she refused both. She would not sell. This land was her father's legacy, bought with his savings and cultivated with his labor until consumption took him 3 years ago. Her mother had followed 6 months later, her heart simply giving out from grief. Victoria had no siblings, no husband, no children. She had only this land, and the determination to prove that a woman could run a ranch as well as any man. The sound of an approaching horse made her reach for the rifle she had set against the porch railing. But the rider who came into view held his hands up peacefully, and something about his posture told her he meant no harm. He was tall in the saddle, wearing a dusty brown hat and clothes that marked him as a working cowboy rather than one of Greeley's hired guns. His horse was a fine roan mare, well cared for but travel-worn. As he drew closer, Victoria could see he was perhaps 30 years old, with sun-darkened skin and eyes that assessed her property with professional interest rather than greed. "Madam," he called out when he was close enough. "Name's Owen Harper. I saw those men riding off and noticed your broken window. Are you all right?" Victoria kept her hand near the rifle. "I'm fine. What's your business here?" Owen brought his horse to a stop near her fence and dismounted slowly, letting her see he wore no gun on his hip. "I've been traveling through Kansas looking for work. Heard in town that you run cattle here. Wondered if you might need an extra hand." I can't afford to hire anyone, Victoria said bluntly. And if you heard about my ranch in town, you also heard that working for me might mean trouble with Marcus Greeley. Owen tied his horse to the fence rail and looked at her directly. His eyes were gray-green, unusual and striking. I heard plenty about Marcus Greeley. Heard he's been trying to force you off land that's rightfully yours. Heard you've turned down his offers more than once. That tells me you're either stubborn, brave, or both. Maybe I'm just foolish, Victoria said, but she felt herself relaxing slightly. There was something honest in this man's face, something that made her want to trust him even though experience had taught her to be cautious. I don't think so, Owen said. He gestured toward her pastures where her cattle grazed peacefully. You've got good stock, well-watered land, strong fences. You know what you're doing. But one person can't run a ranch this size alone and defend it too. Those men will be back. I know, Victoria admitted. The fear she had been holding back crept into her voice despite her best efforts. But I told you I can't afford help. Owen was quiet for a moment, studying the land with an evaluator's eye. When he spoke again, his words surprised her. What if I didn't ask for wages? What if I proposed something different? Victoria frowned. Like what? A partnership, Owen said. I work this ranch alongside you, help you build it up, defend it against Greeley. In return, I get a percentage of the profits. Nothing up front, just a share of what we make together. It was the last thing Victoria had expected to hear. You would work for nothing but a promise of future profits. That could be months away. How would you live? Owen smiled slightly. I've got enough saved to get by for a while, and honestly, madam, I'm tired of drifting. I worked ranches in Texas and Colorado, saved my pay, learned everything I could. I'm ready to put down roots somewhere, but I don't have enough to buy land of my own. This way, we both get something we need. Victoria wanted to refuse immediately. The idea of sharing her father's land with a stranger felt wrong, almost like a betrayal. But the memory of those bullets breaking through her window was fresh, and she knew Owen was right. She could not defend the ranch and run it properly at the same time. She was tough and capable, but she was not superhuman. How do I know you're not working for Greeley? She asked. This could be a trick to get inside my defenses. Owen nodded as if he had expected the question. Fair point. Tell you what, you ride into town and ask about me. My last employer was Robert Crawford in Colorado. I worked his ranch for 3 years before he died and his son sold the place. Crawford's son is a lawyer in Denver now. You can wire him and check my references. The offer was reasonable, but Victoria still hesitated. Why would you want to partner with a woman? Most men in these parts think I should sell out and find a husband. Most men in these parts are fools, Owen said plainly. I've known plenty of women who could outwork and outthink the men around them. My own mother ran our family farm after my father died, raised 4 children, and never once asked for charity or pity. She taught me that capability has nothing to do with gender. Something in his tone told Victoria he was telling the truth. She made a decision that was probably reckless but felt somehow right. I'll check your references. If they come back good, we can discuss terms. But I want it clear that this is my land, my decisions. You would be a working partner, not an owner. Understood, Owen said. I wouldn't expect anything else. They shook hands, and Victoria felt the calluses on his palm that marked him as a genuine working man. His grip was firm but not aggressive, respectful of her strength. There's a bunkhouse out back, Victoria said. It's not much, but it's better than sleeping on the ground. You can stay there while I verify your story, but I'm keeping my rifle close, understand? I'd think less of you if you didn't, Owen replied. Over the next 3 days, Victoria sent a telegram to Denver and rode into Ellsworth to ask questions. The responses she received were better than she had hoped. Robert Crawford's son wrote back effusively about Owen's skills, honesty, and work ethic. The town marshal, one of the few men in Ellsworth not on Greeley's payroll, told her that Owen had come through asking sensible questions and causing no trouble. More importantly, Greeley's men had not returned while Owen was camped at her ranch. She watched him during those 3 days, noting how he moved around the property. He fixed a section of fence without being asked, checked on her cattle with a knowledgeable eye, and maintained a respectful distance from her house. He cooked his own meals over a small fire and never once presumed upon her hospitality. On the evening of the 3rd day, Victoria invited him to her house to discuss the partnership. She had spent hours drafting an agreement that protected her interests while being fair to him. She knew enough about contracts from watching her father's business dealings, though she wished she could afford a lawyer to review the terms. Owen sat at her kitchen table, his hat in his hands, reading through the document carefully. The lamplight cast shadows across his face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the concentration in his eyes. Victoria found herself noticing details about him she had tried to ignore. The way his hair curled slightly at his collar, the breadth of his shoulders, the gentleness of his hands despite their strength. "This is fair," Owen said finally, looking up at her. "More than fair, actually. You're offering me 20% of the profits after expenses, with the percentage increasing to 30% if I stay for 3 years. That's generous." "It's not generosity," Victoria said. "It's pragmatism. I need help and you're willing to provide it. But I need you to understand what you're getting into. Greeley won't stop trying to take this land. Those men who shot up my house will be back. There could be violence." "I understand," Owen said quietly. "I'm not afraid of hard work or hard men. What I am afraid of is spending my whole life working for other people's dreams instead of building something of my own. This partnership gives me that chance." Victoria felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear or anger. She pushed the feeling aside, reminding herself that this was business. "Then we have an agreement. I'll sign and you'll sign, and we'll both honor the terms." They signed the document, and Victoria felt the weight of her isolation lift slightly. She was no longer alone in defending her father's legacy. The relief was so intense that tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back quickly. Owen pretended not to notice. "I'll start work tomorrow at dawn. First priority should be securing the property better. Those fences are good, but we need to set up some early warning systems. Maybe some bells on the gates, clear sight lines from the house." "You've done this before," Victoria observed. "Defended a property, I mean." Owen's expression darkened slightly. "In Colorado, there was a range war between the big operators and the smaller ranchers. Crawford's ranch was caught in the middle. We had to get creative to keep his cattle safe and his family protected. I learned a lot during those months, though I wouldn't want to repeat the experience." "Did people die?" Victoria asked quietly. "Some," Owen admitted. "Mostly from the hired guns the big operators brought in. But in the end, the small ranchers banded together and the law finally stepped in. The violence stopped, but the bad feelings never really went away. That's part of why I left. Too many ghosts." Victoria understood that sentiment. Sometimes the past clung to places, making it impossible to imagine a future there. "Do you think Greeley will escalate beyond intimidation?" "Depends on how desperate he is," Owen said. "A man like that, who's used to getting what he wants, can become dangerous when he keeps hearing no. We'll need to be careful, but we'll also need to be smart. Sometimes the best defense is making yourself more trouble than you're worth." "How do we do that?" Owen smiled. We make this ranch so successful and so visible that Greeley can't move against you without everyone in Kansas knowing about it. We register your brand with the territorial office. We sell cattle at every major auction. We make sure people know that Victoria Ashford's ranch is a legitimate, thriving business. The more legitimate you are, the harder it is for him to paint you as a squatter or a pretender. The strategy made sense. Victoria had been so focused on simply surviving that she had not thought about building her public presence. That's smart. My father always said the best way to keep land is to make sure everyone knows it's yours. Your father was a wise man, Owen said. Then more hesitantly he added, "Tell me about him. If you want to, I mean. I'd like to understand what I'm helping to protect." Victoria found herself talking about her father for the first time in months. She told Owen about how her father had come west after the war between the states, seeking a fresh start. He had worked as a surveyor and saved every penny, studying the land and learning where the water ran true. When he finally bought this property, it was because he knew its value would only increase. "He taught me everything," Victoria said, surprised at how easily the words came. "How to read the land, how to judge cattle, how to keep books." He said the world was changing, that women would have more opportunities in the West than anywhere else. He wanted me to be ready. "He prepared you well," Owen said. "Everything I've seen here shows careful management and good instincts." The compliment warmed Victoria more than it should have. She was not accustomed to praise from men who were not trying to manipulate her. "Thank you. Now tell me about your family. You mentioned your mother ran your farm." Owen's expression softened. "My father died when I was 10, kicked by a horse, never recovered. My mother refused to sell the farm even though everyone said she should. She worked harder than any two men, and she made sure all of us children knew how to contribute. I'm the oldest, so I learned everything alongside her. My sisters and brothers are all settled now, and my mother finally sold the farm last year and moved in with my youngest sister in Ohio. She earned her rest." "Do you miss them?" "Every day," Owen admitted, "but I'm glad they're safe and happy. And I like to think I'm honoring what my mother taught me by helping you keep your land." The conversation drifted to less personal topics, but something had shifted between them. Victoria realized she was no longer thinking of Owen as a stranger or even just a business partner. He was becoming something more complex, someone whose presence made her ranch feel less like a battlefield and more like a home. The next morning, they began working together in earnest. Owen proved to be everything his references had promised and more. He understood cattle instinctively, recognizing which animals were thriving and which needed extra attention. He repaired equipment with the skill of someone who had learned to make do with limited resources. Most importantly, he consulted Victoria on every decision, never presuming to override her authority. They fell into a natural rhythm. Victoria would rise before dawn to prepare breakfast while Owen handled the morning feeding. They would work side by side through the day, mending fences, moving cattle, checking water sources. In the evening, they would review the ranch's accounts together, planning for the next day and the next season. 2 weeks into their partnership, Greeley's men returned. But this time, Victoria and Owen were ready. They had set up bells on the gate and created clear firing positions near the house. When the riders approached, both of them were armed and waiting. "That's far enough," Owen called out when the men were still 100 yards away. His voice carried authority, the tone of someone who had faced down trouble before. The lead rider, a scarred man named Dutch, laughed mockingly. "Who are you? The lady find herself a protector." "I'm her business partner," Owen said calmly. "And you're trespassing on registered property. Turn around and leave, or we'll file charges with the federal marshal." The mention of the federal marshal made Dutch's expression shift. Greeley's influence extended to the local authorities, but the federal government was another matter entirely. Mr. Greeley's just trying to make a fair business deal. Miss Ashford has declined Mr. Greeley's offers, Owen replied. That's her right as a landowner. Now leave, or I'll make sure the territorial governor hears about armed men threatening a legitimate rancher. Victoria stood beside Owen, her rifle ready but pointed at the ground. She was impressed by his approach, using legal threats rather than violence. It was smarter than anything she had tried on her own. Dutch glared at them both, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he spat in the dust and turned his horse. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Owen said firmly. Tell Greeley that Victoria Ashford's ranch is off limits. She's not some isolated woman he can intimidate. She's got partners, witnesses, and legal documentation. If anything happens to her or her property, people will know exactly where to look. The riders departed, and Victoria let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. That was well done. I've been facing them alone so long I forgot what it's like to have someone stand with me. Owen looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. You won't be alone anymore. That's what partnership means. Something in his tone made Victoria's heart quicken. She pushed the feeling away, reminding herself that complicated emotions had no place in a business arrangement. But over the following weeks, it became increasingly difficult to maintain that distance. Working alongside Owen every day, Victoria began to see him not just as a competent ranch hand, but as a man with depth and character. She noticed his kindness toward the animals, the way he would spend extra time with a skittish calf or an injured horse. She saw his patience when equipment broke down, his ability to solve problems creatively rather than with brute force. She appreciated his humor, the dry observations he would make that would catch her off guard and make her laugh, and she became aware, much to her confusion, that she found him attractive. It had been so long since she had thought of any man in those terms that the realization startled her. She would find herself watching him work, admiring the efficient grace of his movements, the strength in his arms, the concentration on his face. When he smiled at her, which happened more frequently as they grew comfortable with each other, she felt warmth spread through her chest. Owen seemed to be experiencing something similar. Victoria caught him looking at her sometimes with an expression that was more than professional interest. He found excuses to work near her, to brush past her in ways that felt deliberate but never improper. When they reviewed the account books in the evening, sitting close together at the kitchen table, the air between them felt charged with possibility. Neither of them spoke about it. They were both too careful, too aware of what was at stake. Their partnership was working beautifully from a business perspective. The ranch was more productive than it had been in years, and Greeley's men had not returned since Owen's confrontation with Dutch. To risk that success for the uncertainty of romance seemed foolish. But feelings, Victoria was learning, did not respect logic or caution. The moment everything changed came on a hot September afternoon. They had been moving cattle to a new pasture, hard work under the brutal sun. Victoria's horse had stumbled in a prairie dog hole, throwing her to the ground hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. Owen was beside her in seconds, having leaped from his own horse with frightening speed. Victoria. He had never used her first name before, had always maintained the formal distance of Miss Ashford. The fear in his voice was unmistakable. Are you hurt? She struggled to catch her breath, her chest aching from the impact. Owen's hands were on her shoulders, his face close to hers, his gray-green eyes wide with concern. I'm all right, she managed finally. Just had the wind knocked out of me. Owen helped her sit up slowly, checking her for injuries with gentle, careful hands. "Your head, your back." "Anything feel wrong?" "I'm fine," Victoria insisted, though she was shaking slightly from the adrenaline. "Really, Owen, I've taken harder falls." But Owen did not let go. His hands remained on her arms, steadying her, and suddenly they were looking at each other in a way that made pretending impossible. Victoria saw in his eyes what she had been trying to deny in her own heart. This was not just partnership or friendship. This was something deeper, something that had been growing between them since the day he rode onto her property. "I was terrified," Owen said quietly. "When I saw you fall, all I could think was that I couldn't lose you." Victoria's breath caught, and this time it had nothing to do with her fall. "Owen, we shouldn't. The partnership, it could complicate everything." "I know," he said, but he did not pull away. "I've been telling myself the same thing for weeks. But Victoria, I'm tired of pretending that working with you is just business. I care about you, more than I should, probably. More than is smart, but I can't help it." The honesty in his words broke through Victoria's last defenses. "I care about you too," she admitted. "I've been trying not to, but I do." Owen's expression transformed, hope and joy and relief all mingling together. "Then we'll figure it out, together. Isn't that what we've been doing all along?" He helped her to her feet, and they stood there in the prairie grass, the cattle lowing nearby, the sun beating down. Then, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Owen drew her closer. Victoria went to him willingly, resting her head against his chest and feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart. They held each other for a long moment, not speaking, just acknowledging what had been building between them. Finally, Victoria pulled back enough to look up at him. "What does this mean for the partnership?" Owen smiled, the expression lighting up his whole face. "It means we're partners in more than just business, if you want that. I know this is your land, your decision. I won't presume." "I want it," Victoria said, surprised by her own certainty. "I want you, not just as a partner, but as something more. I'm just not sure what the something more looks like yet." "We'll discover it together," Owen said. Then, tentatively, he bent his head toward hers. Their first kiss was gentle, almost hesitant, both of them aware they were crossing a threshold. But gentleness quickly gave way to hunger, months of denied attraction finally given permission to exist. Victoria kissed him back with enthusiasm, her arms wrapping around his neck, her fingers tangling in his hair. Owen pulled her closer, one hand at her waist, the other cradling the back of her head. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "That was," Owen began, then laughed. "I don't even have words." "Worth waiting for," Victoria suggested, her lips still tingling. "Definitely worth waiting for," Owen agreed. They finished moving the cattle with a new awareness between them, stealing glances and smiles. That evening, instead of maintaining their usual careful distance, they sat close together on Victoria's porch, watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. "I need you to understand something," Victoria said seriously. "This land, my independence, it all matters to me. I'm not looking to be rescued or taken care of. I need a partner, not a protector." "I know," Owen said. "That's one of the things I admire most about you. Your strength, your determination. I'm not interested in changing you, Victoria. I'm interested in standing beside you." "Good," Victoria said, relaxing against him, "because I'm not changing for anyone." Owen kissed the top of her head. "I wouldn't want you to." Their courtship, if it could be called that, was unlike anything Victoria had imagined. They were already living and working together, already knew each other's habits and quirks. What changed was the freedom to express affection, to touch and kiss, to let down the careful guards they had both maintained. Owen moved from the bunkhouse to the ranch house, though at Victoria's insistence, he took the spare bedroom. She was aware of her reputation in town, aware that an unmarried woman living openly with a man could damage her standing. Owen respected her caution, even as they both chafed at the forced separation. They continued working the ranch with increased energy, driven by their combined dreams of success. In late September, they drove their first major cattle sale to the railroad depot in Abilene, receiving prices that exceeded Victoria's best projections. The money allowed her to repair the ranch house properly, replace equipment, and even hire a few temporary hands for the upcoming winter work. When they returned to Ellsworth after the sale, Victoria insisted they visit the territorial office to register her brand officially and file updated property documents. Owen stood beside her as she signed the papers, his presence making her feel invincible. But their happiness did not go unnoticed. Marcus Greeley, who had spies throughout the county, learned about Victoria's successful sale and her partnership with Owen. He also learned through gossip and speculation that their relationship might extend beyond business. Greeley was a large man who had built his empire through ruthlessness, masked as respectability. He owned the largest ranch in 3 counties, held mortgages on half the businesses in Ellsworth, and had dreams of political power. Victoria's continued refusal to sell was more than a business frustration. It was a public challenge to his authority. One evening in early October, Greeley himself rode to Victoria's ranch, accompanied by Dutch and 2 other men. Victoria and Owen were finishing the evening chores when the riders appeared. "Stay calm," Owen murmured to Victoria as they walked together to meet the visitors. "Let's hear what he has to say." Greeley dismounted with the stiffness of a man unused to ranch work. He was perhaps 50, with gray-streaked hair and cold blue eyes that assessed Victoria and Owen with calculation. "Miss Ashford, I thought it was time we spoke face to face." "Mr. Greeley," Victoria said coolly, "if you're here to make another offer for my land, you're wasting your time." "Actually, I'm here to make an offer to both of you," Greeley said, his tone deceptively friendly. "I've heard about your partnership with Mr. Harper here. Heard you had a successful sale in Abilene. Congratulations." "Thank you," Victoria said warily. "What's your point?" "My point is that you're both clearly ambitious, capable people, but you're limiting yourselves with this small operation. I'm prepared to offer you both positions managing one of my ranches. Good wages, a share of the profits, none of the risk of ownership. And Miss Ashford, I'll pay you triple what your land is worth, enough for you to invest in any venture you choose." It was a clever offer, Victoria had to admit. Greeley was trying to divide them, to tempt them with success without struggle. "And if we refuse," Greeley's expression hardened. "Then you're being foolish. The cattle business is getting more competitive every year. The big operators will dominate and small ranchers like you will be crushed. I'm offering you a chance to be part of the winning side." "We're not interested," Owen said firmly. "This ranch is doing fine and it's going to do better. We don't need your offers or your threats." "Threats?" Greeley's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "I'm making a legitimate business proposition, but since you mentioned threats, let me be clear. I've been patient with Miss Ashford out of respect for her father's memory, but my patience has limits. Accidents happen on ranches. Equipment fails, cattle stray, buildings catch fire. It would be unfortunate if Miss Ashford's stubbornness led to tragedy." Victoria felt rage boil up inside her. "Get off my land. Now." Greeley remounted his horse, his men following suit. "Think about my offer. You have 1 week to reconsider. After that, I can't guarantee your safety or your prosperity." They watched the riders disappear into the gathering darkness. Victoria was shaking with anger and fear. He's going to escalate. That was a direct threat. I know, Owen said grimly, which means we need to be smarter than him. Tomorrow we ride to the federal marshal's office in Topeka. We document everything. His threats, his harassment, his attempts to force you off your land. We create a legal record that protects you. That's 3 days' travel, Victoria protested. Who will watch the ranch? We'll hire someone we trust to stay here while we're gone. The investment will be worth it. Greeley thinks you're isolated and vulnerable. We need to show him that you have connections and resources. Victoria agreed, and the next day they made arrangements with a neighboring rancher, a man named Samuel Trent, who had also resisted Greeley's expansion. Trent agreed to station 2 of his hands at Victoria's ranch while she and Owen traveled to Topeka. The journey to the territorial capital took them through changing autumn landscapes, the prairie grass turning gold and brown, the air carrying the first hints of coming winter. They rode side by side, camping under the stars at night, talking about everything and nothing. On the second night, as they sat by their campfire, Owen took Victoria's hand. I've been thinking about the future, about what happens after we deal with Greeley. What do you mean? Victoria asked, though her heart was already accelerating. I mean us, Owen said. This partnership has exceeded every expectation I had, not just the ranch, though that's going well, but being with you, Victoria. Waking up every morning knowing I'll spend the day working alongside you. Talking with you in the evening about our plans and dreams. I don't want this to end. Neither do I, Victoria admitted. But I'm still not sure what comes next. I care about you deeply, Owen. But marriage, if that's what you're thinking about, it complicates everything. Women lose property rights when they marry. This land would legally become yours. Owen nodded, his expression serious. I know. And I won't ask you to give up your independence or your land. But Victoria, there are ways to structure things so you're protected. Prenuptial agreements, property trusts, legal arrangements that preserve your rights. If you wanted to marry me, if you wanted that kind of partnership, we could find a way that keeps you secure. Victoria looked at him across the firelight, this man who had appeared in her life at exactly the right moment. Are you proposing to me, Owen Harper? Not yet, Owen said with a slight smile. I'm asking if you would be open to the idea. I don't want to pressure you or rush you. But I want you to know that my intentions are serious. When I think about the future, you're in every part of it. I'm open to the idea, Victoria said softly. More than open, actually, but let's deal with Greeley first. I need to know that the ranch is secure before I can think clearly about anything else. Fair enough, Owen said. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. But just so you know, I'm planning to court you properly once this is settled. Flowers, poetry, maybe even a serenade if I can carry a tune. Victoria laughed, the sound echoing across the dark prairie. I'd rather have a well-repaired barn than poetry. How about both? Owen suggested and kissed her properly, the firelight dancing around them. They reached Topeka on the 3rd day and went immediately to the federal marshal's office. The marshal, a stern man named William Porter, listened to their story with increasing concern. He took detailed notes and reviewed the property documents Victoria had brought. Greeley's been causing trouble in other counties too, Porter said grimly. We've had complaints but never enough evidence to act. His men are careful to operate in gray areas of the law, but threatening a property owner directly, that's different. I'll send a deputy to Ellsworth to investigate and to make it clear that Miss Ashford is under federal protection. Will that stop him? Victoria asked. It should make him more cautious, Porter replied. Men like Greeley depend on their reputation and political connections. If he's seen as a common criminal rather than a legitimate businessman, That hurts him. I can't promise he'll give up entirely, but this should buy you time and safety." They left the marshal's office feeling more hopeful than they had in weeks. Porter had promised to send a deputy within days and to open an official investigation into Greeley's business practices. It was not a complete solution, but it was progress. The journey back to Ellsworth was lighter in spirit. Victoria and Owen stopped at a small town along the way and shared a meal at a restaurant, sitting together publicly as a courting couple rather than just business partners. Victoria was surprised by how comfortable it felt, how right. When they returned to the ranch, Samuel Trent reported that everything had been quiet. Greeley's men had ridden past a few times but had not approached or caused trouble. Victoria thanked Trent profusely and paid him generously for his help. The next week, true to Marshal Porter's word, a federal deputy arrived in Ellsworth. He interviewed Victoria and Owen, documented the damage to Victoria's property, and then paid a visit to Marcus Greeley. Victoria never learned exactly what was said during that conversation, but the results were clear. Greeley's harassment stopped immediately. For the first time since her father's death, Victoria felt truly secure on her land. The cattle were thriving, the ranch was profitable, and she had both legal protection and a partner she trusted completely. As October turned to November, Owen made good on his promise to court Victoria properly. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, their colors muted but beautiful in the autumn light. He learned to cook a few dishes beyond basic campfire fare and surprised her with a dinner he had prepared himself. He wrote her a letter expressing his feelings, his handwriting careful and his words sincere. Victoria was charmed by his efforts but also amused. "You know you already have my heart," she told him one evening as they sat together after dinner. "You don't have to try so hard." "I want to try," Owen said simply. "You deserve to be courted and cherished, not just to have someone show up and expect your affection because it's convenient." His words touched Victoria deeply. She realized that Owen understood something fundamental about her. She had been alone for so long, fighting so hard to prove herself, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be valued simply for who she was rather than for what she could accomplish. "I love you," she said, surprising herself with the admission. She had not planned to say it, but suddenly the words were necessary. "I love you, Owen Harper. I think I've loved you since the day you offered me partnership instead of pity." Owen's face lit up with joy. "I love you too. I've been waiting to say it, not wanting to rush you, but God, Victoria, I love you so much it sometimes scares me." They came together in a kiss that was different from all the others, deeper and more certain. This was not exploration or tentative affection. This was commitment, the acknowledgement that they had each found in the other something rare and precious. "Marry me," Owen said when they finally broke apart. "I know we talked about waiting, but I don't want to wait anymore. Marry me, and we'll draw up whatever legal documents you need to feel secure. This ranch will stay yours, your property, your legacy. I just want to be your husband, your partner in everything." Victoria looked at him, this man who had become essential to her life, and found that all her hesitation had vanished. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were married in Ellsworth 3 weeks later on a cold December day with snow threatening but not yet falling. Victoria wore a dress of deep blue silk, her only concession to tradition, and Owen wore his best suit. The ceremony was simple, performed by a traveling minister, with Samuel Trent and his wife serving as witnesses. Before the wedding, Victoria and Owen met with a lawyer in Topeka who drew up documents ensuring that Victoria's property remained legally hers. Owen signed without hesitation, proving his commitment to their equal partnership. It was unusual, perhaps even radical, but it was right for them. After the ceremony, they hosted a small celebration at the ranch. A few neighboring ranchers came, people who had watched Victoria's struggle and respected her determination. They toasted the couple's happiness and the ranch's success, and there was a warmth in the gathering that had nothing to do with the fire burning in the hearth. That night, as man and wife for the first time, Victoria and Owen stood on their porch looking out at the land they would build together. Snow had begun to fall, dusting the prairie with white, making everything look clean and new. "Are you happy?" Owen asked, his arm around her waist. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," Victoria admitted. "When my father died, I thought I would spend my whole life alone, fighting to keep what he built. I never expected to find someone who would fight with me instead of against me." "You'll never be alone again," Owen promised. "Whatever comes, we face it together." The winter was harsh but beautiful. Victoria and Owen spent the cold months maintaining the ranch, planning for spring, and simply enjoying each other's company. They learned the rhythms of married life, the compromises and adjustments, the moments of frustration and the deeper moments of connection. In February, Victoria realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a complex mix of emotions. She was thrilled at the thought of a child, of creating a family with Owen. But she was also anxious about how pregnancy and motherhood would affect her ability to run the ranch. Owen's reaction when she told him was pure joy. "A baby. We're going to have a baby." He spun her around carefully, laughing. Then, seeing her worry, he grew serious. "What's wrong? Aren't you happy?" "I am happy," Victoria assured him. "I'm just scared. What if I can't handle both the ranch and a child? What if I have to choose?" "You won't have to choose," Owen said firmly. "That's what partnership means, remember. We'll figure it out together. During your pregnancy, I'll take on more of the physical work. After the baby comes, we'll adjust again. Maybe we hire more help, maybe we scale back some operations temporarily. But Victoria, you don't have to be superhuman. You don't have to do everything alone anymore." His words reassured her, and as her pregnancy progressed, Owen proved true to his promise. He took on the harder physical labor while Victoria focused on the business management and lighter tasks. They hired a young man named Thomas Green to help with the daily work, giving themselves more flexibility. In the midst of their preparations for the baby, they received unexpected news. Marcus Greeley had been arrested by federal authorities for fraud and intimidation tactics against multiple ranchers across Kansas. The investigation Marshal Porter had opened had uncovered a pattern of illegal activity. Greeley would face trial and almost certainly lose his empire. The news spread through Ellsworth like wildfire. Several ranchers who had sold to Greeley under pressure filed lawsuits to reclaim their land. The power structure that had dominated the county for years was crumbling. Victoria felt a weight lift that she had not fully acknowledged carrying. "It's over," she said to Owen when they heard the news. "The threat is really over." "You won," Owen said, pride clear in his voice. "You stood your ground when everyone said you should give up, and you won." "We won," Victoria corrected. "I never could have done this alone." Their daughter was born in September of 1879, almost exactly a year after Victoria and Owen had first declared their love for each other. The labor was long and difficult, but when Victoria finally held her daughter, all the pain was forgotten. The baby had Owen's gray-green eyes and Victoria's dark hair, a perfect blend of both of them. They named her Rose Margaret, after both grandmothers. Owen held his daughter with a tenderness that made Victoria fall in love with him all over again. He was a natural father, patient and gentle, willing to wake for nighttime feedings and happy to simply hold Rose while she slept. The ranch continued to prosper. With Greeley gone, the competitive atmosphere in the county eased. Victoria formed cooperative agreements with other ranchers, sharing resources and information. She became known not just as the woman who had defied Marcus Greeley, but as a savvy businesswoman whose advice was worth seeking. As Rose grew from infant to toddler, she became a fixture around the ranch. She would ride in front of her father on his horse, squealing with delight. She would follow her mother around, asking endless questions about the cattle and the land. She was fearless and curious, traits Victoria recognized from her own childhood. When Rose was 3, Victoria became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she was no longer anxious about balancing motherhood and the ranch. She had proven to herself that she could do both, that she did not have to sacrifice one dream for another. Their son was born in the spring of 1883, a healthy boy with Owen's smile and Victoria's determination. They named him James Henry, after Victoria's father. Owen was overjoyed to have a son, though he was quick to say that he would have been equally happy with another daughter. James was quieter than Rose had been as a baby, more contemplative. But he had his own strength, a stubborn streak that showed itself early. Victoria joked that he had inherited her refusal to give up, even as an infant learning to walk. The years passed in a rhythm of hard work and deep satisfaction. The ranch grew steadily, expanding as Victoria was able to purchase adjoining properties from ranchers looking to retire. Owen proved to have a gift for breeding cattle, improving their stock until they were known throughout Kansas for quality. By 1885, Victoria and Owen's ranch was one of the most successful operations in the county. They employed a dozen hands, managed over 1,000 head of cattle, and had invested in new equipment and techniques. More importantly, they had created a family and a legacy that honored both of their pasts while building something entirely new. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching Rose and James play in the yard, Victoria reflected on how much had changed since that day Owen had ridden onto her property. She had been alone then, desperate and defiant, determined to hold onto her father's legacy at any cost. Now she was surrounded by love and success, not because she had compromised her principles, but because she had found someone who shared them. The land was still hers, legally and spiritually, but she no longer faced its challenges alone. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked, noticing her reflective expression. "Everything," Victoria said. "How different my life is from what I expected. How grateful I am that you offered partnership instead of pity or pressure." Owen smiled and took her hand. "Best decision I ever made. Though I have to admit, I didn't know what I was getting into. I thought I was just looking for work and a chance to build something. I didn't expect to find love and family and a home." "Neither did I," Victoria admitted. "I was so focused on survival that I almost forgot to live. You reminded me that the land is worth protecting, but so is happiness." Rose ran up to the porch, her face flushed with play. "Mama, Papa James says he can jump higher than me. Can we have a contest?" Owen laughed and stood up. "Absolutely. But I warn you, your old papa might show you both how it's done." He jumped down from the porch with exaggerated flair, making both children dissolve into giggles. Victoria watched her family play, the prairie stretching golden behind them, the ranch house solid and welcoming. This was what her father had dreamed of when he bought this land. Not just success, but a place where family could flourish and dreams could take root. As the sun set over the Kansas prairie, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Victoria felt a peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. She had fought for this land, bled for it, refused to surrender it even when surrender seemed like the only option. And in the end, she had not just kept her father's legacy. She had expanded it, enriched it, and created something that would endure for generations. Owen returned to the porch, slightly out of breath from playing with the children. He sat beside Victoria and pulled her close. "Happy." "More than I ever thought possible," Victoria said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for seeing me as a partner when everyone else saw me as a problem to solve." "Thank you for being brave enough to say yes to partnership," Owen replied. "To all kinds of partnership." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their children play as darkness gathered. Inside the house, lamps were lit, casting a warm glow through the windows. The ranch was quiet except for the lowing of cattle and the whisper of prairie wind. Victoria thought about all the nights she had sat on this porch alone, frightened and uncertain, wondering if she would lose everything. Those dark days seemed like another lifetime now, a story about a different person. She had become someone stronger, someone who had learned that true strength was not about refusing help, but about choosing the right partnerships. In the years that followed, Victoria and Owen's ranch became legendary in Kansas. They weathered droughts and economic downturns, always finding ways to adapt and endure. Rose grew into a young woman as determined as her mother, insisting on learning every aspect of ranch management. James developed his father's gift with horses and cattle, becoming an expert breeder sought after by ranchers from neighboring states. Victoria never forgot the lessons she had learned during those difficult early days. She made a point of helping other women who wanted to run ranches or businesses, offering advice and support. She and Owen hosted gatherings at their ranch, creating a community of people who believed in cooperation rather than cutthroat competition. When Victoria's hair began to silver and lines appeared at the corners of her eyes, she looked at them not as signs of age but as evidence of a life fully lived. Every wrinkle represented a decision made, a challenge overcome, a moment of joy or fear or triumph. She had earned every mark time had left on her. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Victoria with a gift. He had commissioned a sign to hang at the entrance to their ranch, beautifully carved wood with letters burned deep. Harper and Ashford Ranch, EST, 1878. Victoria was moved to tears by the gesture. Owen had insisted on including her maiden name, acknowledging that the ranch was built on the foundation her father had laid and she had defended. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it represented everything their partnership had been: mutual respect, shared effort, and love that enhanced rather than diminished individual strength. "You didn't have to do that," Victoria said, though she was clearly delighted. "Yes, I did," Owen replied. "This ranch, this legacy, it belongs to both of us. But it started with your father's dream and your courage. That should be remembered." They hung the sign together with Rose and James helping. It faced the road where all visitors could see it, a declaration that this was a place built on partnership and perseverance. As Victoria approached her 50th birthday, she began thinking about succession. Rose had married a good man, a veterinarian named Daniel Foster who shared her passion for ranching. James was courting a teacher from Topeka, a smart young woman who had already proven she could handle ranch life during visits. Victoria wanted to ensure that the transition of the ranch to the next generation was smooth and fair. She and Owen worked with lawyers to create a structure that would divide the ranch equally between their children, while keeping it operational as a single entity. It was complex, but they were determined to avoid the kind of family conflicts that destroyed so many ranches. One afternoon, as they reviewed the succession documents, Owen looked at Victoria with an expression of wonder. "Do you realize what we've built? Not just the ranch, but the family, the reputation, the legacy. When I rode onto your property 27 years ago, I was hoping for work and a chance. You gave me so much more. We gave each other more, Victoria corrected. That's what love does. It multiplies rather than divides. Owen reached across the table and took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that had begun to trouble his fingers. I'd do it all again. Every challenge, every hard day, every moment of fear, because all of it led to this. Victoria squeezed his hand, feeling the familiar calluses, the warmth of his skin. So would I. They continued working together into their 60s, gradually shifting more responsibilities to Rose and James but never fully retiring. The ranch was too much a part of them to simply walk away. Even on days when their bodies protested the work, they found satisfaction in being involved, in knowing that their efforts still mattered. In 1905, when Victoria was 63 and Owen 67, they celebrated the birth of their first grandchild, Rose's daughter Eleanor. Holding the baby, Victoria was struck by the continuity of generations. Her father had held her this way, dreaming of her future. She had held Rose and James, imagining who they would become. Now a new generation was beginning, carrying forward the legacy of the Harper and Ashford ranch. Your great-grandfather would be so proud, Victoria whispered to baby Eleanor. He bought this land with nothing but faith and determination. Now look at what it's become. Owen stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders. Our great-grandfather would be proud of you, he amended. You're the one who fought to keep it when everyone said you should give up. We fought, Victoria said, as she had said so many times over the years. We fought together. As they aged, Victoria and Owen's love deepened in ways that surprised them both. The passion of their early years had evolved into something quieter but no less powerful. They knew each other completely, could communicate with a glance, could anticipate each other's needs and thoughts. They had weathered every storm together, and each challenge overcome had strengthened the bond between them. On quiet evenings, they would sit on their porch as they had for decades, watching the sunset paint the prairie in gold and crimson. Sometimes they talked, sharing memories or discussing ranch business. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, simply being together. Victoria's health began to fail when she was 70. Her heart, strong for so many years, started to weaken. The doctor said it was simply age, the wear and tear of a life fully lived. Victoria accepted the diagnosis with characteristic pragmatism, determined to make the most of whatever time remained. Owen became her constant companion during those final years, attentive and loving. He helped her when she grew weak, sat with her for hours, told her stories of their life together. Even as her body failed, Victoria's mind remained sharp, her spirit undiminished. One spring morning in 1912, Victoria woke with the certainty that this would be her last day. The knowledge came without fear, simply as fact. She asked Owen to help her to the porch, and they sat together watching the sunrise over the land she had defended so fiercely 60 years earlier. It's beautiful, Victoria said softly. As beautiful as the first time I saw it. It is, Owen agreed, his voice thick with emotion. He knew, as she did, that they were saying goodbye. I'm not afraid, Victoria said. I've lived exactly the life I wanted. I kept the promise I made to my father, and I found love I never expected. I have no regrets. Owen's tears fell freely, but he managed to smile. You are magnificent, every day in every way. Loving you has been the greatest honor of my life. Take care of the ranch, Victoria said, her strength fading. And Owen, when your time comes, don't be alone. Find companionship, find joy. Promise me. I promise, Owen said, though he could not imagine life without her. Victoria's last breath came as the sun cleared the horizon, bathing the prairie in golden light. Owen held her hand as she slipped away, his heart breaking even as he marveled at her peace. She had lived on her own terms until the very end, strong and certain, beloved and loving. The funeral drew people from across Kansas. Ranchers, business owners, women Victoria had mentored, families she had helped. They came to pay respects to a woman who had proven that determination and integrity could overcome any obstacle. The stories they told painted a picture of someone who had changed her community for the better, who had blazed trails for others to follow. Owen remained at the ranch, keeping his promise to Victoria. He continued working alongside Rose and James, teaching his grandchildren the skills and values that had made the ranch successful. He never remarried, content with his memories and his family. He lived another 8 years, dying peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82. His last words were Victoria's name, spoken with love and longing. They buried him beside her on a hill overlooking the ranch, where they could eternally watch over the land they had built together. Rose and James continued operating the Harper and Ashford Ranch, honoring their parents' legacy. They expanded it further, adapting to changing times while maintaining the core values of hard work, integrity, and partnership. Eleanor, Victoria and Owen's first grandchild, eventually took over management, proving as capable as her grandmother. The ranch continued to thrive through generations, each one adding to the legacy Victoria and Owen had created. The sign at the entrance remained, weathered but enduring, a testament to a partnership that had overcome impossible odds. In family stories passed down through the years, Victoria was remembered not just for her stubbornness or her business acumen, but for her courage in accepting partnership when she needed it most. Owen was celebrated not for rescuing her, but for seeing her as an equal and offering collaboration instead of control. Their love story became legend in Kansas, an example of how two people could build something extraordinary when they combined their strengths. It was a reminder that the best partnerships in business and in love are those where both people remain fully themselves while creating something neither could have achieved alone. The land Victoria had refused to sell, the acres her father had chosen with such care, remained in family hands for over a century. It stayed productive and beautiful, a living memorial to the woman who had fought for it and the man who had fought beside her. Every generation that worked that land knew they stood on a foundation of courage, partnership, and love. And on quiet evenings, when the sunset painted the prairie in gold and crimson, those who knew the story would swear they could feel Victoria and Owen's presence, still watching over the ranch, still together, still loving the land and each other. Their partnership had transcended time, becoming part of the very soil, as eternal as the prairie wind and as enduring as love itself. The Harper and Ashford Ranch stood as proof that some things, when built with integrity and defended with courage, could last forever. And that the greatest legacy was not land or wealth, but the example of two people who had loved each other enough to build a life based on equality, respect, and unwavering partnership. Victoria had refused to sell her land to anyone, and in doing so, she had found not just survival, but love, family, and a legacy that would endure for generations. It was a story of the West at its finest, where courage and love could overcome any obstacle, where partnership was more valuable than gold, and where two hearts working as one could achieve the impossible.